Here we go. Hello and welcome to the Mastermind, Body, and Spirit Show. I'm your host, Matt Belair. Today's guest is the conceptualizer of integrated election reform and the integration of holistic analytics, true cost economics, and open source everything engineering, or OSEE, such that we can achieve a prosperous world at peace at 10 to 20% the cost of the failed Western economic model burdened by banks and lawyers. He is the pro bono chief enabling officer of the Earth Intelligence Network, a 501c3 devoted to teaching holistic analytics, true cost economics, and open source everything engineering, now also CEO of Open Source Everything, a for-profit that seeks to help all countries. America first if Donald Trump will listen and create a prosperous world at peace, a world that works for 100% of humanity at 10% of the cost of the failed Western economy. In 2017, he was recommended for the Nobel Peace Prize, a prize he hopes to help President Donald Trump win if the president will implement the ideas being offered to him in the here and now. The first step is the creation of an international open source agency for local to global information sharing and sense making, as well as OSEE innovation. Welcome to the show, Robert David Steele.
Thank you. That's a great introduction, and I will admit to being a spiritual retard, but I'm trying.
Well, I so appreciate your time. I came into recognition of you and your amazing work. That's just a brief bit of your bio, but you became the commissioner of the International Tribunal for Natural Justice, your former CIA. You've done a tremendous amount of work in service to humanity, discovering truth, and so much. So it's an honor to have you on the show. Do you want to give the listeners a little bit about your background and some of the stuff that you're up to, and then we're going to dive right into it?
Sure. I think it helps that I grew up as the son of an oil engineer in South America and in Asia, including 4 years in Vietnam as a child from 63 to 67. I saw the world. I came back, I did a very good political science degree at Muhlenberg with a thesis on multinational corporations and home host country issues. That's when I realized that the banks and the corporations were basically looting the earth. I was rewarded with a fellowship. I did a thesis on predicting revolution. That helped me realize that all the preconditions for revolution exist today in the United States of America. The two biggest ones are concentration of wealth and loss of faith in the legitimacy of the government. And that's where Donald Trump comes in, because with all of his warts, he is more authentic and more committed to America first than what we call the squad. The four women, one of whom appears to have committed immigration fraud in order to get into the United States. And these are the people who are attacking America. And by the way, I had lunch with Dr. Randy Short, one of our black leaders in America. He told me that not only is Donald Trump not a racist in the eyes of the black leaders, these four women are vastly more racist than anybody he knows across the United States of America. So there's some interesting things going on. Anyway, so I joined the Marine Corps because I thought I'd become too intellectual. And I was very bored by 4 years at peace. So I joined the CIA, which was very competitive. I mean, 1 in 25,000 is accepted. And I was one of 65 people accepted for the clandestine service, and I'm very proud to have served there. 3 tours overseas. I was one of the first people to do terrorism as a full-time job in the 1980s. I wrote the original CIA standard operating procedures for a clandestine field station. Believe it or not, they didn't have one. And I think they've thrown it away since. They like to do loosey-goosey bullshit. And I left CIA when I found out that they were basically totally about stealing and building their budget and doing evil things. They were not about actually getting the truth for the president, which is what I thought I'd signed up for. The Marine Corps had known me because I was a Marine Corps intelligence reserve officer. They invited me to come to the Marine Corps, leave the CIA, and I helped write the Marine Corps Master Intelligence Plan, create the Marine Corps Intelligence Activity. And this is where it gets interesting. I realized as the ranking civilian, the second ranking civilian in Marine Corps Intelligence, the ranking civilian in the Marine Corps Intelligence Activity, CIA doesn't know jack shit about the rest of the world. They basically have been focusing on Russia, China, Iran, Libya, and Korea, and a little bit on Cuba. And they don't know anything about Burundi, Haiti, Somalia, whatever. They also don't do useful comparative intelligence, which is a word for decision support, so that the president can understand where we're strong on trade and where we're weak on trade. General Tony Zinni backed me up on this. Several years ago, he said that when he was commander of the U.S. Central Command, fighting 2 wars and 12 Joint Task Force actions, he got, at best, 4% of what he needs from the secret intelligence community. So what I'm about is decision support, which is the outcome of intelligence. I am not about the secret inputs that include torture and rendition and drone assassinations and all this other evil crap that they're doing. I would like the president to cut the secret intelligence community by 70% and then consolidate all of the pieces in a revitalized CIA, which I want to keep alive, and have the open source agency providing 96% of what he and the public and Congress and the media need. And oh, by the way, that same open source agency will help bring up Pennsylvania, Texas, Florida, the Mississippi, Alabama, all the Wisconsin, Minnesota, Michigan, all of these places that are dying because Obama and Bush and the other presidential crime families exported manufacturing, exported jobs, exported everything. Open source everything engineering allows the president to achieve his infrastructure made in America goals at 10 to 20% the price of the current failed Western economic system. Now, I know that President Trump knows that I exist. I also know that his mail and the First Lady's mail is being filtered. We had a case of this just 3 or 4 days ago. I sent the First Lady a copy of a book by Marianne Williamson called A Politics of Love, or Politics of Love. Great, great book. I'm a transpartisan guy. I take good ideas from everywhere. A Zionist in the mailroom refused my package. And I know this because USPS sent me a note. So I sent a note to the Chief of Staff of the White House saying, I've asked the USPS to open a postal investigation because it is a federal felony to obstruct the delivery of mail to its intended recipient. So inside the White House, you have people who are filtering the mail of the president and the First Lady. And that's not good. I do believe, however, that we're all emergent. I am also told, David Brock is talking about this, that the president plans a full disclosure event in mid-September. And of course, this conference where I'll be appearing with Bill Binney and Sasha Stone and David Brock and Corey Good and Laura Eisenhower, that's taking place in late August. And I really believe we're going to have a chance to talk about what happens when we have a full disclosure government.
Yeah, well, you said a lot there, and that's definitely what I want to get into because, going down the research path of like what's happening on this planet, for me, the research was how do we have war? How can we be an intelligent species but be murdering each other, allowing, mass murders and also people to starve to death? It didn't make sense. Fast forward a bunch of years later, I would tell my friends some of the things that was going on. They couldn't really handle it, but or want to dive deeper. Like it wasn't something they wanted to pursue. The International Tribunal of Justice pops up. I also work on something that's around the organ harvesting happening in China. And these are absolutely awful things that actually exist. And when you've done your research, which is way beyond mine, also you worked on, when you were in the CIA, it's like truth and misinformation. So you have to have a really incredible eye on what is real and what isn't. And doing this research, it can get really convoluted. I'm like, is it, these space travelers? Is it just humans? Is it information? Like what the heck is actually going on? So in a full disclosure world, what have you come to for your ideas on what's actually happening on this planet right now? Why does it feel like we're being suppressed? Why are all these evil things happening? And how do we create a change into a world that makes sense where we are cooperating while we are living in peace?
I want to draw people's attention to an interview that just came out with me in Tehran Times with a very, very fine master's or PhD guy named Javad Hirania. And the title of the interview is Full Disclosure, Extraterrestrials, No Nuclear War, End of the Deep State. And it's the top item at Phi Beta Iota. That's PHIBETA-IOTA. Phi Beta Iota, like Phi Beta Kappa, but iota for intelligence.net. And in there, I talk about how all the bad stuff started back when essentially there were gods that came from the skies. And unfortunately, we were invaded by evil energies, evil stellar civilizations. And they turned the priests and the bankers into their shop stewards, and they in turn started dumbing us down. And so for the last 200 or 300 years, the human species has been forced out of the Garden of Eden, where we had heaven on earth and we had a world, a prosperous world of peace. We were forced into factories. We were forced into fenced enclosures. Basically, the whole world has been about concentrating wealth and treating people, Hillary Clinton calls us deplorables, treating people as cattle, as things to be exploited. Now, the Tibetan monks and a whole bunch of other people, and this is why I'm happy to say I'm a spiritual retard, because I hadn't thought about this until about 10 years ago when I started getting into this literature. Not just the extraterrestrial literature, but the literature on consciousness. And in my article for the Tehran Times, I talk about why there is no nuclear war that's going to happen, why Benjamin Netanyahu is probably a reptilian who has been captured and is trying to create a nuclear war, but all of the nuclear missiles have been decommissioned by positive energy, okay? And I talk about Albert Einstein saying everything is energy, and I talk about consciousness that goes through rising forms of energy toward cosmic consciousness, which is pure energy embodied in love, okay? And so it's an interesting article. It's very, very bleeding edge, and I'd be glad to have your audience find this article at phi-beta-iota.net and then share it. And by the way, I'm being shadow banned on Facebook. I'm also being shadow banned on YouTube and Twitter. I normally get 500,000 views or more on a video, but they've been holding me back. It's relevant that the Anti-Defamation League is the top trusted censor, flagger, and manipulator of data on all of the platforms, whether it's Amazon or Facebook or Google or Meetup or Twitter or YouTube or Wikipedia. The Anti-Defamation League is right in there, but that's coming to an end. There's some major lawsuits that are being brought against the ADL and the Google Gestapo, as I call them. And over the next 2 to 4 years, I believe a completely new Web 3.0 will come out and displace them. So I have completely lost my train of thought here. Get me back on track.
Yeah, sure. Well, you said a lot of things there, and I did have an opportunity to read that article, and I linked it in the comments. So if anybody wants to check it out, they'll be able to see that, and it'll be in the show notes as well, because it's a very fascinating article, and you really dive deep really quickly. And also, you know, you've reviewed over 2,500 nonfiction books across 97 different categories, which is an immense amount of information. And it also needs to be said that you're not the average human being. You were trained in figure out information versus disinformation. And I think that's where a lot of people get stuck. And in this article, you talk about energy, consciousness, and cosmic infinity.
Well, let's go there. First, let me say that Barbara Honegger, who was a special assistant to Ronald Reagan, is a friend of mine. She contributed to the volume that we gave to the president, Donald Trump, on the 8th of August of 2018 on 9/11 Truth. And Barbara recounts a meeting she was in which Ronald Reagan asked Bill Casey, the director of CIA, how will we know when CIA has been fully successful? And according to Barbara, Bill Casey answered, Mr. President, we'll know that CIA has been fully successful when everything Americans believe is a lie. Okay, now I've spent the last 15 years studying what are called information pathologies. And if you look up at phi-beta-iota.net the term information pathologies, you'll find where I've reviewed a number of books, including Fog Facts, Forbidden Knowledge, Lost History, License to Lie, which is the book about the U.S. government lying to the public, Weapons of Mass Destruction, Weapons of Mass Instruction, Manufacturing Consent, Propaganda, Missing Information. In a nutshell, there's two major facts everyone has to keep in mind. The first one is a fact of incompetence. We process 1% of what we collect. That's true whether you're NSA or Forbes or IBM or whatever. 1% of what we collect. We collect 1% of what's published. What's published is 1% of what's written, and what's written is 1% of what's known, including tacit knowledge in the head, okay? So governments and corporations and banks everywhere, universities are working with 1%, a 1%, a 1%, a 1%. I mean, it's like 6 zeros plus 1, all right? So we're a very stupid species when it comes to actually collecting, processing, and taking advantage of information. And that's more or less the benign side of it. The other side of it is that we have never done true cost economics once we are able to put down the indigenous Native Americans. Okay, the indigenous cultures, which are making a comeback. I mean, I'm a huge fan of Sasha Stone, who founded Humanitat and this court, which also has a weaponization of the biosphere commission. But he speaks to this. When we repressed, when the Catholic Church and the organized revisions repressed Native indigenous knowledge, they basically repressed centuries of understanding of the earth and the harmony between people and the earth and between earth and other planets and the cosmos and so forth. We went towards scientific reductionism, which is basically legalized idiocy, and we rejected the faith of people and the intuitive knowledge of people and the advanced consciousness of people, all right? So we're now making a comeback. And I think that in the next 15 to 20 years, we're going to see a resurgence of humanity. We're going to see governments fall. We're going to see banks and corporations like Monsanto and everything touched by the Koch brothers. That's the correct pronunciation, by the way, the Koch brothers, okay? So you really need to focus on the fact that humanity has been repressed, our ability to do telepathy, to see through objects. Objects are energy. And if you're in the right K-band, you can not only throw a fork through a window and have it go through, you can see through a wall, okay? And this is not stuff I'm directly familiar with, but in reading all of this nonfiction stuff, and I suppose I should say I'm not giving away any secrets. I've got a lifetime secrecy agreement. I'm loyal to that oath. Most of what I know comes from my reading and my talking to other authors. And it happened by accident, and I'm glad that it did, because frankly, I've spent the last 10 years getting ready to lead a national tour, a Chautauqua tour, that will re-educate the public away from all of the crap that the political system, the economic system, the academic system, and the treasonous scientific system have been doing. And if the president does full disclosure, that's going to release free energy, anti-aging, computerized healing, and all these technologies have been co-invented or invented by others here on Earth, and then they've been murdered and the technology is classified. So there is a huge explosion of good that is going to happen between now and Election Day 2020. It will then persist for 4 more years of what I believe will be the Trump administration. 2020, see a split ticket. An alt-right white guy, an alt-left black woman, a coalition cabinet with everybody, including Greens and Libertarians, and 12 hard promises to America that include closing every U.S. military base overseas and making it impossible to be an illegal alien in the United States of America.
Okay, holy crap. You touched on a great deal of information. Again, what I wanted to share from my research is, interestingly enough, with the indigenous cultures, I've done a lot of training with David Lombert, Senepass, also know Clifford Mahooty, they're both going to be at Full Disclosure Fest as well. And when talking with David and Clifford, when they speak about extraterrestrials and these knowledge, the first interesting thing is they have a 20,000-year history. The second thing is they talk about all the energies that we're talking about. Third is that extraterrestrials are just a part of their culture, and it's nothing like fantastic, like how we kind of glorify it and things like that. It's a very interesting correlation. And when looking, like Lauren Eisenhower as well, looking at all these documentaries about how the ETs have influenced all of our history, going back to World War II.
I think it goes back hundreds of years to pre-Atlantis.
Oh, yeah, I think so too. And I recently watched Beyond Majestic, and that's why I'm bringing it up. It's because
it's a good movie. I reviewed it very favorably.
Oh, nice. And yeah, so there's so much information coming out. And so my question to you would be, would the implications in that movie of these like huge organizations with like human trafficking, organ harvesting, mass murder. This is really horrendous, awful stuff. So how do you see the world working right now? And what would you, if you could implement something and you had a magic wand on the planet, what things would you start to shift and change so we can create a planet of peace, prosperity, and openness, collaboration, all the good stuff?
Well, I'm totally loyal to President Trump, but I'm also keeping my integrity. So it's going to be a tough love kind of loyalty. He's got to get rid of Jared and Ivanka and Bolton and Pompeo and Abraham. I mean, he has surrounded himself with people that make him look bad. I served in Venezuela, and the president was lied to by Pompeo, who works for the CIA's dark side, and Bolton, who works directly for Benjamin Netanyahu, who's a warmonger first class. Venezuelan intelligence has always been owned by Cuban intelligence. And Russian intelligence has always paid the bills for Cuban intelligence in Venezuela. So CIA basically walked into a trap. Every single defector, every single so-called dissident group that they thought they were managing with all these young puppies that don't know any better, it was actually being managed by Cuban intelligence. It was an entrapment operation. And so the United States basically walked into Venezuela as if it were king of the hill, and they got their ass handed to them by the Cubans, who I happen to admire. I think Cuban intelligence is very good. Two of my classmates were videotaped doing clandestine operations in Cuba because all of our Cuban agents had passed the polygraph and were actually working for Cuban intelligence, okay? So do not overestimate the capacity of CIA to do clandestine operations. In my personal judgment, most of what they give the president is a lie, and they are effective in maybe 5% of the clandestine operations that they claim to be managing. The reality is that almost everything we're being told by the academia, let's take Jeffrey Epstein, okay? When Epstein first came out as a spy, who also had a counterintelligence to Iran offensive counterintelligence for denied area for a year or so, I immediately said Jeffrey Epstein is a Mossad operation.
Well, hold on, your computer just went all crazy. Started to sound like a robot.
Not my
agreeing
with you.
Now I sound like a robot. Sound okay?
I'm fine.
Huh. I'll look on Facebook to see if other people are hearing it too.
Live streaming on Facebook is probably a death wish.
Yeah, that could be interesting. That the fact that 15 minutes into this, we could stop the live stream and then throw it up on YouTube.
I don't care, as long as you're recording it so you can post it later.
Yeah, we might have to stop the live. I wonder if that's the thing. Be interesting.
It's your call. As long as you're recording it so you can post it to BitChute, not just YouTube.
Right. Right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop the live stream on Facebook, see if that fixes it. They just turned you into a robot. All right, let's test that.
All right, so coming back. In 2008, when Epstein was...
Fixed it.
Yeah, look, Facebook is dirty.
Unbelievable.
Dirty. And by the way, my name is a red flag because the ADL has me red flagged. I think I'm number 7 on the ADL hate list. And I'm trying to work my way up to number 3. When I run for president, I'll be number 1. But bottom line here is that Epstein, first off, Ghislaine Maxwell is the daughter of Robert Maxwell.
It keeps chopping. Do you want to just come out and come back in and we'll start a brand new one and clip them together?
It's your call. I don't have time for technical problems.
Yeah, well, you just sound like a robot. So everything you're saying, like I can just send you a link real quick and we can
send me a new link. We'll start over and then the editing's up to you. But please
Yep. I'm going to send it right away.
All right.